Did he not know? This is the cover of National Geographic that you've seen on the newsstands. So there were quite a few things that he didn't know. Some of them are just information that he didn't have. Darwin didn't have any direct evidence of natural selection. Now we have it in abundance. You all know the story of bacteria evolving resistance to various drugs. It's a serious problem in most hospitals. The bacteria are exposed to the drugs. The ones that are resistant survive and outgrow. The other ones die. And then you end up with a population of bacteria that's resistant to streptomycin or tetracycline or whatever. So drug resistant, clear and obvious example of natural selection at work. Darwin didn't know that. He didn't have those kinds of examples. And it's not just things like bacteria. Here's a little diagram that's in all the evolution textbook. This is happens to be one from a book by Douglas Futuyama, who's probably the most famous textbook on evolution, written the most famous textbook on evolution. These are mussels in Long Island Sound. And they have a gene, it's a gene for an enzyme called aminopeptidase 1. And you don't really need to understand the biochemistry, although it's well worked out. But it turns out that one of the variants of this gene allows these mussels to survive better in salt water. So down here, in the freshwater end of the sound, the mussels have mostly orange variant of this enzyme. And as you get more and more salty, closer to the Atlantic Ocean, they have more and more of the blue version of this particular gene. Different versions of genes are called alleles. Okay, so different variants. So the variants within this species of mussels, you're selecting by natural selection for the variant that allows you to live in salt water. Direct observation of natural selection at work. In this case, it hasn't become fixed and it hasn't taken over the whole population. It's within the population, but that's how natural selection starts off. And this is just one of hundreds of examples that we have today that Darwin did not have. He'd never had this kind of evidence to prove. So natural selection isn't a theory at all. Natural selection is a fact. We know that natural selection happens. The theoretical part is, whether natural selection explains everything or most things, or whether it explains the fossil record where we can't actually do experiments. That's part of evolutionary theory. Natural selection is a powerful component of, but natural selection itself is not a theory. It's a known fact. It does happen. Darwin couldn't have made that statement. He also didn't have access to the same kind of fossils. We now have a nice fossil record of the evolution of whales, for example, turning out to be a really beautiful example of transitional forms, beginning with an organism that was clearly lived on the land and ending with our modern marine whales. This has all come about in the last 20 years, this particular, it's just one of many examples of clear pathways of evolution that Darwin surmised. He had bits and pieces, but he didn't have the examples. The fact that birds are a form of dinosaur, and they clearly have descended from precursors to dinosaurs, which I'm sure you've been reading about. Okay, another clear example. There are many, many such examples, including our evolution. Darwin didn't have the data that we have. He didn't have the fossil evidence that showed how there were many transitional species between us and the common ancestor of humans and chimps. So now we have, over a period of 6 million years, many examples of fossils that indicate the slow, gradual change from our ancestor, our chimp human ancestor, to modern humans, including some side branches that became extinct. He wouldn't have been surprised at that. That was the sort of thing he was talking about, that some variants are going to become extinct, some are going to become extinct.